Greetings and salutations. Haha, get it? Because Alex is here. Anyway, welcome to episode 4's discussion with a certain somebody who I may have just revealed who it is. Would you care to introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. I am AlextheKaijuFan. I would like to thank Cedrixar for giving me this absolutely great privilege to be on his podcast episode. I watched the previous 2 episodes with Pacific Zilla and Michelle Ferdedwa, and I am really honored to be able to have this opportunity to be here.
I appreciate that compliment, Alex, but you saying absolute there just made me visibly wince, so I hope you're happy with that.
Good.
So we're here to talk about episode 4, as already mentioned, and we are basically going to rip it to shreds, because we both do not like this episode one bit.
No.
I would like to begin by talking about the main issue that we have with it, and the one that could probably be, that may or may not be resolved by the end of these next 2 episodes upcoming. The timeline tomfoolery that is currently happening is hurting my brain. I do not like it. I do not like where it is going if it decides to stay the route of an alternate timeline, because it would just be a confusing mess and would just, I feel, be more ammunition against Ultraman that all the stupid Toei shills who only watch Rider made after 2013, because all of them are their favourite Toku ever, and anything that came out before that or isn't Rider is bad, are going to use it against us as a reason to not start watching Ultraman, because it has confusing alternate timelines. They keep changing the storyline around, etc.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I take issue mainly, because, as I say, it could be used against us, and also that it's just like unnecessary information or events to happen, because it wasn't really the only reason that this is really happening is because Tartarus felt like it, and we didn't really need to see what happened after the war. We would have greatly appreciated, I think, seeing the actual war itself. And by that I mean not the last 4 minutes of it. So, which was a point I'll bring up a bit later on. But still, if you're gonna have like a time traveling villain, which is like, I believe it's the first one in Ultraman we've ever had. So to go this long into however many years it's been since Ultraman started, and not bring in a time traveling villain is quite an astonishing feat, honestly. But now that we finally have one, it's just making me groan, because it's definitely going to play up with the whole continuity. And there's the obvious reason of like, well, why didn't Tartarus just go back to the beginning and erase all Ultramen from existence? So there's a bunch of points I'd also like to bring up a bit later, but I'm going to let Alex talk now, give his thoughts on the timeline tomfuckery that is currently unfolding, and if he has anything to say on it.
Oh, well, I definitely agree with a lot of your points. I do think that it was a pretty unfortunate decision on the part of Tsuburaya to show simply the last 4 minutes of the Great Ultra War, as you mentioned, and also just put so much of an emphasis on just simply the aftermath of the conflict, because the whole point of, at least with the franchise such as Ultraman or any particular action sort of based media property, is to show the conflict, the fighting. And with such a conflict as the Great Ultra War, something that has been teased from the very beginning with Ultraman Taro and reference within Ultraman Mebius literally being the catalyst of that series finale as well, because Ultraman Taro was very influential in bringing together the original Ultra Brothers, and Ultraman Mebius was also quintessential in reviving the original Ultra Brothers, because they hadn't been in any real property since, I believe, Zafi, if you count Ultraman Neos, but all the other ones hadn't really been anything, unless you also count Heisei Ultra 7, but Ace, Taro, and some of the others hadn't been seen for some time. And I believe that it was just a really confusing decision, because it messes with the timeline and it creates a very inconsistent narrative that really set in motion a lot of the new generation shows, as well as the conflicts that were set in place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's an irony in the fact that this section of an Ultra Fight miniseries, i.e., the ones that are just mindless action and gratuitous special effects and CGI and fighting, and you do not decide to show a literal war, there's something like, I don't know, it seems kind of backwards. That logic. It didn't
It is.
really help that they also had to kind of they still tied it into the scene we saw in Mebius with King dueling Emperor, but like this honestly didn't really show Emperor as much of a threat because, as I say, as soon as he was there, he was defeated. He was more forbidding. He was more foreboding, more evil in the bloody Ultra Festival stage show from 2018, where Sora first showed up. It's just like if you have this setup that you've been teasing since 1973, why not follow through with it all the way? It just feels like it would have been a more interesting story to have shown how the war progressed, like actually shown the start of the war, how the conflict was initiated, and what was happening at that time. I was telling Alex yesterday, but I relate it a lot to the Time War in Doctor Who, something that we have known about since 2005, and was essentially the reason why the show was canned for a while, and what happened in between that time. And then when the Day of the Doctor came out, the big 50th anniversary special that was meant to show the events of it, it showed about 4 minutes of it, kind of like what happened in this episode of Galaxy Fight. So the parallels between the two are uncanny, I find.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing I'd like to bring up is Belial's character, because previously, before this episode released, what did we know about Belial's past? That he was a former comrade of Father of Ultra, one of his mates, you could say, Alex.
Yes, group of mates.
Mm-hmm, yes, that old chestnut. But he just wanted more power to become more powerful, so he went and tried to steal the plasma spark. Didn't manage to do it, and was exiled, where he fused with Rayblood and became evil Black and Red Belial. But now, it's strange how them providing more context for his backstory makes me not like Belial as much as a character. Because what's his backstory now? Oh, he wants to get power because he's jealous of Ken and also is simping for Mother of Ultra. Okay. Like that if you want this like deadly serious villain, why are you giving him such a such a cliched, laughable turn to evil backstory? They're kind of doing Belial dirty, and I mean, it's not even the fact that he's here at all because it is in the past, so they're not just reviving him for no reason in the present day. But now, if this series continues as I fear it might, like just so you know, this could all these points I'm bringing up could be null and void by the time this chapter is over. Because for all we know, Zero might just get some magical bullshit mind wipe ability, and everything goes back to normal with the timeline restored. But as of right now, as of the recording, we honestly do not know. So we're only going off assumptions for now, but it still worries me that Belial could be tainted as a character now, because the only reason he did that is because he couldn't be with Wammon, and Ken was better than him. He's just like the worst kind of jealous rival cliche with no development beyond that.
Yeah, I definitely agree that it's very unfortunate. Similar to how you made a Doctor Who comparison, I personally have not really gone into Doctor Who, but I do recall a friend of mine in person mentioning that last year that he was very disappointed that. What I would also compare Absolute Conspiracy to at this moment, it would be akin to the Star Wars prequels. And I'm actually not the only person who compared it to them. There's also some other people in the comment section who I saw compared it to the Star Wars prequel movies. But in a sense, Belial is very similar to Darth Vader from Star Wars, in my opinion, because they're both good characters who were initially viewed as chosen, or they were self evidently believed to have been divine characters and stronger than their average mates or fellow peers and colleagues. And they even both have a son that ends up destroying them figuratively or literally, but either way, toppling them from being evil in that similar sense. With Darth Vader, it's Luke Skywalker, and with Ultraman Belly, it's Ultraman Geed. Very similar narrative, in my opinion, there. But with Ultraman Belial, he kind of reminds me of Anakin Skywalker from the prequels. I personally like Anakin Skywalker, but I don't think it's properly exceeded with Belial, because one of the biggest reasons why people did not like the prequel movies is because Darth Vader is this very menacing character, and he's all of a sudden turned into a whining boy in the prequel movies. And I felt this was worse with Belial, because Belial's main motivation is that he wants power, but there's no real driving force to that power. He just wants to hold Mary Ultra Mother as a basic status symbol, objectifying her in a way. Whereas I don't necessarily think that really fits the character, because that makes Belial seem a lot more petty as a character when you see him in future shows and movies. And I think that sort of delegitimizes him as a way, as a credible threat.
Doesn't this also kind of confirm, speaking of Mother of Ultra, that she is descended from royalty in some way? And if that's the
Yeah,
case, then what's her relation to Yulian?
I don't know. They don't really expand upon it. I always thought the blade, what was it, the ultimate blade? It was kind of a weird aspect, because I remember in Mebius being foretold as this legendary artifact, as Ultraman goes with having many legendary effects. And in Absolute Conspiracy, Mary just runs away and then just grabs to him. She's saying, "Oh, hey, you need this. This was passed down from my generation." But there's no expansion on the backstory,
No, no.
considering that this episode is supposed to expand upon a concept that needed to be expanded on in other series. Yet this whole episode left me wanting even more expanding, because it cut out so much out and didn't really place a lot of focus in the right areas, in my opinion.
Yeah. It's. I mean, I don't really need the entire rundown of the lore of a sword or anything like that, because like that's honestly not important. But it's just like, if they're gonna make a point about it previously and then have it show up again as an important item, surely you'd want some more context behind it. Because what do we know that
Mm-hmm.
the blade can do? It's a sword. It can make some sort of like weird sparkly pocket dimension, and it turns the user older just so it doesn't clash with Mebius's footage for a brief minute. Because I don't think many people noticed that, honestly, that Father of Ultra got older when he was in the pocket dimension just so it matched the Mebius footage,
Mm-hmm.
and then magically became young again when he left it. So,
That was quite odd, in my opinion. But I think it kind of reminds me of Zero Shining Field, that they later would expand upon too, where the passage of time is different.
yeah, I suppose, but then why would it not have affected anyone else in that case? This, I don't think we should really be talking about this. This is like irrelevant. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I'd like to bring up though is that the only good thing that could possibly come out of the timeline not being fixed is Jeed wouldn't exist, and that would make me very happy. Because I've made it evidently clear in the past I do not like Jeed at all. So that would honestly be a miracle if Jeed was suddenly written out of continuity. But they won't do that, and I know they won't, because all the overseas fans would get really pissy.
I think Geet is all right. It's not. I sometimes forget about it in a way, because
Mm,
it feels very there to me.
mm-hmm. Of course. Just leached off Orb, I think, too much in terms of concepts.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not here to talk about that, though.
Oh, Cedrixar, can I mention something that you stated earlier?
Uh huh.
Oh, what you were saying is what I would have really liked to have seen in this episode, and it's something that I thought they were going to do and actually have play out for either the whole episode or maybe even two of the episodes. But I thought they were going to go into the origins of the war and sort of discuss what I would have really liked to have seen is sort of the diplomacy and how it broke out, because this was supposed to be a large war where Emperor had amassed one of the largest monster and alien armies. And what's pretty funny is that they always showed the shot of Emperor leading monsters such as Bemstar and Snowgon and some of the other ones. And in the actual clip of Absolute Conspiracy, none of them are shown. I can maybe understand Snowgon, but Bemstar has been available for some time, and I don't know why they just put Bemstar flying around for at least a second, because it sort of delegitimizes the actual teasing of the conflict itself.
Mhm.
And speaking of diplomacy with Ultraman, I think it would have been interesting because the Ultraman, I guess, sort of hierarchy and legitimacy always has this sort of these titles that they give to ultras. For example, you were talking about this earlier, Sujix, on previous episodes. But for example, Nails would be part of. I 721 would be part of the Security Bureau, I believe.
Yeah,
Was that what
721
he
is
was a
part
part
of
of?
security. Neos is part of the like elite task force, whatever that means.
Yeah, they could have definitely expanded upon that. I think those kind of branches in M78 and show their different roles in the war, but they don't.
Well, I mean, that's all right because none of that was established. They did say that, oh yeah, the council have decided to make the space garrison a thing since the wars happened.
Hmm.
But
I just
it,
would have liked to see more components fight together and show how it set up the foundation for everything.
yeah, like you were saying a bit just then as well. Like there wasn't really as much of a scale to Emperor's army. It's like, what did we really see? We saw 4 aliens. Yes, 4, not 3, because everyone won't believe me. But there is a Dada that shows up for about 2 seconds on the planet fighting Belial.
I remember that. It's in the wide shot, the
It,
landscape shot of the battle, right?
it is, yes. And no one believes me that there's a Dada there. It's just like, bro, just use your eyeballs, visually scan across the screen, and you will find it. Well, yeah, but the majority of the war at that point, the majority of the ending of the war, I should say, was shown through just laser beam effects happening in the sky, which was a nice touch, I grant you, but it's just like, why can't we see that? Like, we don't know who any of the allegiances are of those beams that are firing off. So for all we know, it could just be random beams firing which here, there, and everywhere for no reason. It's just like, if you're gonna go through with it, just go through with it, as I said earlier.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, the Tartarus, I mean, has got himself a good squad though. At the ending cliffhanger, I don't mind the whole team he's got going on there. That's probably the only aspects I really liked because for an ultra fight episode, this went really really slowly. Like, I don't know if you felt the same, but it's just like this is such slow pacing for a series that's meant to be quick
Yeah.
fire action. But the tease we got at the end of Rabitos and the rest of them finally having Mold and Judah together again, because they've been going like just like Judah's suit becomes Mold, then it becomes Judah again, and now they've just made another suit for him. Finally, it's just like it's gonna be more the content wise. I think in the next 2 episodes will be better than this, but story wise, I'm not entirely convinced because next part they're probably going to introduce even like Tregear, and they're going to be expanding and visually showing things that happened in the Tiger prequel book, which will be an interesting. It'll be interesting, and like Hunter Knight Tsurugi showing up as a Hikari in the Arb gear again. But I'm still gonna not entirely think it's going to be worth it, purely because of the content we've had so far in this chapter isn't leaving a very good impression.
Hmm.
Anything else, Mr. Alex, before we wrap up?
Oh, can I talk about some things I actually liked about the episode?
Oh yeah, I don't really have much else to say, so you can take the reins.
Oh, okay. I actually liked a pretty decent amount of things about the episode on a technical level. For one, I'm going to be honest, this episode opened up really nicely because I liked how it just showed all the lasers and explosions and shockwaves going on to show that it was a large conflict. But because it was very short, I didn't really get myself invested in just the scale and spectacle of everything because once it showed the actual fights going on, that's when I realized that the lasers and the explosions going on were just a forefront illusion to how tiny the battle was. And I do remember Dada because, ironically, I noticed this the other day when I first watched it that Dada doesn't actually get killed. It's just Godola.
Yeah, he just kind
Dada
of
is nowhere to be
disappears.
seen, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah, he just disappears. He's not even captured or killed. He's just not there for some reason. I don't even know why, to be honest. And I noticed that Belial, he always has something against the Godolas, that specific race. They always show him fighting.
that's
I
very
don't really
true.
know why.
And
Hmm.
maybe that would have made a more interesting backstory, though. Maybe that would have made an entirely more interesting plot than the one we've currently got. Honestly,
Hmm.
just like oh
Yeah, I
how
was very
you
disappointed.
know, Belial wants to steal the plasma spark because Godola said his mum was fat or something like that, and he's wanted to prove him wrong.
Oh, no. That makes sense.
Yeah, mother of Belial. Who would that be? Who would have the balls to birth him?
I don't know. That's kind of scary. Now it's going really far back now in the lore.
Yeah. Anything else?
Oh, and just about the final battle against Emperor, it felt very quick and anticlimactic. A lot of
Definitely.
the fighting was just swordplay, but it wasn't even really elaborate swordplay. I'm gonna be honest, I got a greater sense of fulfillment watching Ultraman Victory take on Judah. I felt that was a little bit more elaborate and dynamic
Yeah,
compared
definitely.
to Father of Ultra and Emperor fighting each other. And I'm gonna be honest, the whole attack felt very similar to Belial when Emperor slashes his sword and he wipes out a group of ultras. It actually really reminds me of Belial in the beginning of Geed, except I felt that Belial's had better shot composition and cinematography because the distance covered was a lot greater. So it showed a greater sense of distance and scale, but also the camera did a nice Dutch angle to put an emphasis on how terrible all the ultras exploding were.
Uh-huh.
But this was a very static, medium range shot that I just wasn't really impressed with. Cinematography left me wanting
Yeah,
more. But the things that
yeah.
I did
I'm
like,
not
though, huh?
expecting like top grade like TV show level cinematography from an ultra fight show though. Mainly because
Mhm.
they're just green screening a lot of it, ironically, onto a green background most of the time in this episode.
I mean, that's true though, but I still think that the previous Ultra Galaxy had some really nice shots in some areas. I think that Ultraman Reboot's fight against Peguila was very visually stunning. I liked a lot of the motion shots and tracking in that fight, which is pretty great in my opinion because as you mentioned, it's a green screen. The fact that they did a good amount of tracking in a lot of the fights in that particular show was very impressive to me. But another thing that I did like, I had to give credit to the English dub. I really enjoy the English dub.
Oh,
Believe it or
really?
not, I
Oh, yeah.
think that the voice actor they got for Belial, if I recall, was actually Zero's voice actor in the previous Ultra Galaxy. They've changed around Zero's 3 times already in the dub. I've noticed they have the different dub for him in the Ginga S and the X movies in the dub, which I just watched an hour ago, which is why I was a little bit late. But it was also they changed his voice in New Generation Heroes, and then Belial's voice is now Belial's voice in Absolute Conspiracy was actually Zero's voice in New Generation Heroes,
Yeah, it
and
does
now
suit
somebody
Belial
else
more.
voiced Zero.
I liked the shut up delivery, like when
Yeah, I
yeah,
agree.
that was good delivery, but
Hmm.
it's like yeah, it does suit Belial more. I wasn't a fan of Zero's English voice in New Gen because he just sounded way too old. So and like that's the problem I'm having with Taro now. He just sounds way too young.
Hmm. I think Zero also kind of sounds a little bit young too.
Yeah, he sounds younger now, which I appreciate.
Hmm. But I think the best voice for Zero, for me at least, was the X and the Ginga S movie dub. it sounds just as how I would imagine an English version of Zero sounding, because it's in the middle of not being very young in the sense that he sounds as if he's a very shy teenager, but it's not old in the sense that he sounds like a 30-year-old man. He sounds as if he's a mid 20s adult that's very confident. Because when I watched the Ginga S in the X movie, he has a certain confidence to him that really matches the body language of the actual Zero.
Hmm.
And I personally think that Winkler's team for dubs was pretty solid. But I also really like this team of dubbers because it's actually two different dubbing cast members for the Ultra Galaxy movie shows as well as the movie dubs. I don't really know why they chose to have a different cast, but I like both fairly equally. They, as you mentioned before, they got Kasugi for Powered, which was pretty awesome in my opinion. But going back to the episode though, I did like some of the visuals. I like seeing M78, and the fighting shots were really nice in regards to tracking. There were some really nice choreography moments with Father of Ultra and Bellio. In my opinion, a lot of the tracking was pretty impressive considering it's a green screen. Because I remember comparing it to, say, for example, the Ultra Galaxy Legends movie, and there were some very static shots of some of the fighting, and that's understandable, but I could tell they've definitely tried a little bit more. But overall, though, I really think this was a pretty disappointing episode. It really let me down in a way because I remember being really excited for this. And this was what really sold me on Absolute Conspiracy as a whole. I had never really been excited for a property in such a while because I thought they were going to really expand upon the history. But instead, they kind of desecrated on the history in a way, you know?
Hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree that chapter one is definitely just, despite chapter one's pacing issues, is definitely already superior to chapter two, one episode in. But I cannot be too presumptuous, though. We still have 2 episodes to go, because who knows, they might actually fix things by then.
Hmm.
So we will just have to wait and see. And with that, I think we're all done and sorted and dusted in words here. So I'd like to thank Alex for showing up.
Thank you, Cedrixar.
Well, that's all right, Alex. Hope that this was an interesting little listen. Because I'm a podcaster now apparently. So here you go. Have another episode for you. And I guess see you next week for the next part of this series, where we'll have a different guest star showing up, you could say. And yeah, that's about it from us. Take care, have a mighty fine baguette, and see you next week for when more timeline tomfoolery arises. Bye bye.